All right, so heater failed on. This is my second cobalt that's failed on, so I'm not getting any more of those. I've got a bag of ice in the water. It's been in here for a while. We were at 97, now we're at 93. So we're going in the right direction. As for the coral, the Monty looks terrible. Bird's nest, dead. You got a lot of dino blowing up in the sand bed. That was almost gone and doing good, but it's back. But honestly, it doesn't look too bad. So I don't think this has been going on for too long. Yeah, other than those two back there, the brain lost a lot of color. We'll see what it does. So far, could be a lot worse.
Welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and here's the tank the next day. So let's dive in. We'll do the post-mortem, and then we'll talk about what happened and why. And here's the tank. It looks terrible, but it could look a lot worse. The first thing you might notice is there's a little Scopus tank swimming around in there. That's a big success. I've had that guy for like 2 years. He grows super slow in this tank. I guess there is something to that saying that if you put fish in a small tank, they'll grow slower. But he lived through it, no problems. In fact, a lot of the corals look pretty good. All my soft corals made it through without a problem. This Lobo looking thing here, perfect. My bounce mushroom, fine. Zoas, great. My Zoas on the left side, they're still pulled in because I just turned the lights on, but they're fine. The Xenia in there, not so fine. The Leptos look pretty darn good. My Heliofungia, it looks scraggly, it looks ugly, but there's no tissue recession. I think it's going to be fine. My Hollywood Stunner Chalice, less fine. It doesn't have a lot of tissue recession, but it looks super bleached, super pale. It's lost a lot of color. I'm worried about it, but it's got a chance. The back of the tank is where it gets ugly. The big plating Monty, it's quickly toasting. I don't think it's going to make a difference whether I pull it or leave it, but I'm going to leave it for now. The bird's nest next to it, basically dead. I ended up knocking it off the rock earlier today, doing some stuff in here, but it's basically dead. The Setosa next to it, it's pretty bleached out. It looks rough, but I think it'll survive. So the two Monties I'm going to leave. We'll see what they do. The bird's nest, it's dead. I'm going to pull it. And then there's my Fiji Fabia. This coral's not replaceable. They're not imported from Fiji anymore. It looks pale. It looks ugly. We'll see how it does. All things considered, I'd say it looks pretty good. This tank went to 97 degrees. And so far, I've got a Monipora that I have copies of that I think is going to die. I've got a bird's nest that's basically dead that I have copies of. And I have some other corals that are stressed. The only coral that I think that didn't make it, that I don't have copies of, is this green Cephastria. It looks really bad. I don't think it's going to come back. It's encrusting. I can't get it off the rock, so we'll just have to see how this one turns out. But this is the one that I will probably completely lose. So today, less than 24 hours after I caught the problem, the tank is rough. But I'm very optimistic that this tank is going to surprise me as to how fast it's going to recover. So here's the culprit. It's a cobalt neotherm heater. Now, I should have known better, right? Like, I'm sure if you've watched this channel for a while, you know I had this exact same thing happen a couple of years ago. Now, since then, I've talked to Cobalt about this very issue. They swore up and down this problem was fixed, my heater would not fail on, and that they would even give me a new heater to replace the old one. I didn't even take that. But the reality is the problem wasn't fixed. and the heater failed on, taking this tank temperature to 97 degrees. So it is Cobalt's fault that they built a heater that fails on and then lied to me about the fact that it wouldn't do it again. I mean, I spoke to them in person about it. So I am upset about that. But as the aquarist, I should have provided my own insurance. There's a ton of controllers on the market that could have prevented this problem. I really don't want like an apex or anything on this tank. The whole point behind this tank is that it's as easy and simple as possible. I do water changes on this tank, and I scrub algae off the glass, I feed the fish, and I do basic gardening. That's all I do to this tank. This is my keep it simple, stupid tank. And that's the way I like it. So an Apex for me was expensive and not simple. So it didn't meet with what I was wanting for this tank, but very well could have saved it. The other common aquarium controller you see a lot of people use are the Inkbirds. And a lot of people say they're great, but there's a good reason I don't have one of those on this tank. The company that makes the Inkbird controllers hit me up to check out a PAR 38 Lite. They wanted me to test it. It was for algae growth. So PAR 38 Lite for algae growth seemed kind of cool. So I was interested and I inquired about that, but since they were the company that made the Inkbird controllers, I was really interested in testing an Inkbird controller for my heaters. But they didn't want me to test an Inkbird controller. After several emails back and forth, remember, they hit me up. I did not go to them. I got the very distinct impression that they did not want me testing their Inkbird controller on my aquarium for YouTube. So after that, I did not want anything to do with that controller. Like, why didn't Inkbird want me testing that controller on my tank? What were they trying to hide? At least that was the impression I walked away with. So at that point, those controllers were completely out the window for me. I might have been wrong, and it might have been the right piece of equipment to save this tank. And they're like $60. In fact, that little Neotherm failed on, paired with an Inkbird, would actually still do a great job heating this tank. But oddly enough, when the company doesn't want me testing it on YouTube, I really question the quality of the product. But the biggest reason this aquarium never got a controller or anything is, well, I didn't think I needed it. I've been dealing with dinoflagellates in this tank, and one of the ways I was battling it was to run a higher tank temperature. I've been running this tank between 82 and 84 degrees, right in that 83-ish range, but it fluctuates. And to do that, I had to run two heaters. I ran the 100-watt Cobalt, and then I ran another 50-watt heater. Now, it took both of those heaters to hit that 83 degrees, 84 degrees sustainably. So as far as I was concerned, at this point, even if the 100-watt failed on, it couldn't get my tank up there, right? Because no matter where I set the temperature gauge, it couldn't bring my tank temperature up. It wasn't physically capable of doing it, at least not when it was working. So I didn't believe that if it failed, it was really going to be that big of a problem. Even though, like an idiot, I had already had a 100-watt heater fail on in this tank and shoot the temperature upwards. So I should have known better, but since I couldn't make the heater hit the temperatures I wanted, I didn't think if it failed on, it was going to be a big deal. That was my fault. It really was, but given what I was dealing with, I just didn't think it was a big deal. And then as long as we're adding excuses like, I'm on a budget, guys. I'm not a rich person. I make a middle-class income, and whenever I dump money into these tanks, you'll probably notice most of it goes to livestock. I'm a big gearhead, but if I have to choose between spending money on gear or livestock, I always buy livestock. And it's to my detriment, I realize. And those are things I personally have to work on. So, One thing I'm working on in life is making good choices. So going forward, maybe we'll invest a little less in livestock, a little more in gear, and we'll get both of these big tanks ironed out. And all things considered, considering this tank went to 97 degrees. 97. I am actually really happy with the way it works. PNS Pro Bio. I'll link the video I did with Ken from Hydrospace down below, but this is products from Hydrospace, and I honestly think it's an amazing product. I feed this to this tank every day as a coral food. It works fantastic. The corals seem to love it. So I'm going to feed it today as a coral food, and I'm going to give it a bigger dose than normal. The goal is to keep the corals as fat and happy as possible. If I was to feed just a dead, dried coral food, any of the uneaten food would just break down into nitrates and phosphates. That's not what I want. I'm expecting a big nitrate and phosphate spike in this tank because I think we're going to have a lot more death than just the corals I'm already seeing. So the corals we're seeing may continue to die. Other corals may die. And then I don't have any idea what else in this tank has also died as far as microfauna and bacteria and everything else goes. I really don't know. I'm expecting more death though. So this is a coral food that's alive that isn't going to break down into those organic compounds, but it's also a denitrifier. So it's going to help with the nitrates and phosphates that are created from stuff dying off in this tank. So this really does seem like a 1-2 punch and a good solution. I started feeding this product to this tank and my 210 just right after I I accidentally sent 80 gallons of fresh water to my 210 gallon reef. The fallout from that was actually pretty minimal, all things considered. And the reason I believe that is PNS Pro Bio. I've been feeding it to it ever since, and it's been amazing. After everything that happened, I'm only really dealing with a few dead corals and an algae issue. That's it. It was so much better than I expected that I can really only attribute it to PNS Pro Bio. So we're going to try it again. I mean, it's the perfect opportunity. I need to fix this tank. I need to get it back to where it was. And to me, this looks like the best solution. Will it work? Like, comment, and subscribe to find out.